Alright guys, so in order to do the ambient occlusion bake real fast, there's not a lot we need to change. First thing I'm going to do is let's go back to the start up here, go to sampling, and because we're just going to preview this, let's just kind of drag these things down so we have a nice even quick render. Go to baking. Baking for these two objects is going to be about the same. Okay, we just want these basic shapes. And for our background color, because of the way ambient occlusion works, we're just going to want a white background color, so 111 all the way. Make sure orthogonal reflections is turned on, and then everything else here should be the same except for when it comes to outputs. In this case, we don't want the normal map. What we're going to want is an ambient occlusion map. Well, ambient occlusion is not directly on this list. So what we need to do is we need to add, I found the best way is to add a custom shader. So by checking the custom box, you're going to see a little checkerboard here. Click the checkerboard, and that's going to bring you up the Create Render Node dialog box. Now, what we want to use is we want to use the Turtle Ambient Occlusion shader. So I'm just going to click on Maya, and you're going to see this thing that says ILROCC Sampler. Okay, that's the Turtle Ambient Occlusion shader. If you want to read more about it, there's a help that goes through all the little options. But basically, what it looks like is this. Okay, now starting off, 64 to 256. This will work just to make sure that everything is baking right. Then what we'll do is we'll upgrade these settings. It'll be a little slower, but it'll give us a much nicer result. So if I'm going to go ahead and hit the bake button, and as you can see, it has baked out some form of ambient occlusion. So the good news is that it's working. The bad news is this isn't exactly as pretty as what we would like it to be. So once it's working, we can kind of really dial this stuff in. So let's go back to samples. Let's crank this back up to 1 and 4. Hit it. That's going to give us, as you can see, a somewhat better result. Okay, looks like I'm getting some kind of an error in here. Might need to change something. Okay, so you can change inside first to closest. That can give you some different results. Found the error. It was a missing envelope, a missing source. Custom shader. What I like to do is I like turning on this uniform sampling. Cranking the minimum raise up to about 128 should gives a pretty good result. And then firing this thing off one more time. And then what you'll see is with kind of a nice looking ambient occlusion that you can use, and add the rest of the objects and all that to that. Now this one's neat because, as you can see, we have the nice ambient occlusion going on with the objects themselves. This is just between the low and the high. Why? Well, because the objects are spaced out. All right. So to actually get the real ambient occlusion for the objects put together, what we need to do is pull these objects back together again. Okay. Now by just pulling our slider back down, we reassemble the object, and then I'm going to go ahead and save that snapshot. I'm going to re-render this. So now you can see a much changed, much different ambient occlusion render. Why? Because these objects are now closer together. There's more occlusion going on between the different objects. You can see where the pegs are actually causing occlusion on the model. And what that does is that's going to give us a much different look. So the first image is going to be just the ambient occlusion for the objects themselves, okay, kind of like their self occlusion. But this will be for all the parts put together. So this is the one that we're really going to want for our textures. And also, this is one of the reasons that I really like the way Turtle sets their renders up as far as the per surface target and source is the connector. If I had set all of these as sources, okay, for the connector, what would happen is I would end up with probably a lot of rendering errors where it was clipping through and using different parts of the different cages in order to create the ambient occlusion map. Was running into some major problems with that for the back plate, but by using the specific targets and specific sources like this all at one time, I can bake out a complete ambient occlusion map with a much fewer errors. Alright, so now that I've got a normal map and I've got the ambient occlusion map, what I want to do is I want to test these and see what they're looking like on my model. So real quick, what I'm going to do is go to the low poly here, and I've already assigned a test shader. Okay, this test shader is just simply a blend, and I've added bump mapping to it, and I have added I don't have a color, so right now it only has the normal. Alright, so what I'm going to do is just to redo this one, break the connection, go and assign a new one, go back to Maya, and we want to use 2D textures, file, and it's going to give us a bump value with the little director node, and then use as bump. We want to change that to tangent space normals. Click over here, select the file, and then we're looking at our wall sconce normal. Go ahead and open that up, and as you can see, nothing has happened. Well, let's go to 6. So textures are on, and still nothing has happened. Change the renderer to either high quality or viewport 2.0, and we finally have our baked out normal map. Okay, so that's part 1. Now let's test our color map. So let's go back to our test shader, go to color, do the same thing, file, and image name. Grab our Sconce AO, load it in, and then there you have it. Okay, so there is the normal map and the ambient occlusion applied. This will be a good kind of start. Got some errors or some things I can either Photoshop out or adjust the geometry on. But this is a good start for our texturing process, which is what I will get into next.